So I now realize that posting last week's video called the deepest twin flame video ever made was like opening up Pandora's box. And now we are collectively compelled to go many layers deeper. Because upon realizing through this very polarizing reaction that I got, that people are either feeling the extreme relevance and experiencing as if I'm speaking to their own soul and conveying that one story that we're all universally traversing, or people have no idea what I'm talking about and are stuck in this confusion of trying to understand what are the masculine and feminine archetypes and what the heck is this twin flame experience at the heart of the matter. And so here goes. If you haven't watched my other twin flame content, go back in time and start with the original video called All About Twin Flames. And as you proceed into the different nuances of this experience, you're going to see this path open up in multiple directions. Because one of the deep points that I want to emphasize is that there's no way to experience twin flame healing without going through inner healing. As the nature of this journey is not about some kind of glamorized romantic union. It's not even about the divine partnership that so many idealize in the physical. It's really about an energetic, spiritual, and mental marriage of different opposing energies. And if we can allow for that unity consciousness to ensue within our own individual fields, then we can experience this story taking us to new heights in our own spiritual awareness and inner life experiences. It's not about understanding how to enter divine partnership to fill an inner void, because so many people are pursuing the twin flame story as such, as this kind of a fairy tale that they so badly want to believe in to destroy the notion of separation. However, we're going to destroy that notion from a different angle by unpacking what actually causes separation and why the understanding of it is essential to understanding our presence in the third dimensional realm. So as human beings, we're all present as vessels of divine intelligence. We are all units of consciousness, and to have a human identity, we are comprised of the polarizing masculine and feminine identities. All of us house these two polarities. This is akin to being a magnet with a north and a south pole, or having a negative and a positive charge polarity. You can't experience the concept of a self without housing both complementary aspects, because there's no way to mesh with reality without housing that essential duality. We are all fractals, as a human avatar, of that dualism, which is the nature of the third dimensional matrix. And in order to understand who we are, we must rub against everything else that is seemingly separate from us to understand what we are made of and what we are a match to in the physical. The reason why we house these two energies is to learn the nature of correspondence, to understand who we are based on what we're attracting, and to also gather, through the variety of different experiences that we have, what we are able to develop through our ability to be the masculine, to be the giver of our own energy, which ends up creating and manifesting potentiality in the physical, and likewise to understand if we are allowing for the feminine experience, which is the softer, more subtle experience of being the receiver of energy and divine intelligence, which is always available to guide us along our journey. Without a healthy balance of the two polarities, we would experience extreme polarization to the point that the physical breakdown of our body or emotional state would be inevitable. Being too polarized in either one or the other polarity charge leads to an extremely imbalanced experience across all domains of the conscious experience, that is the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. For instance, if you are too dominant in your masculine charged polarity, you're going to be experiencing hyperfixation upon the need to give your energy overtly in the physical sense. What that leads to is overstimulation of the lower chakra system. It creates this hypermaterial pull for more success, achievement, creation, physical validation, and needing to receive the mere reflection of what you're able to give through other people's feedback, which can create this codependent desire to be constantly giving of yourself and understand what you're able to experience as a part of yourself through others' eyes. This kind of masculine overdominance is essentially the nature of narcissism. It's when you're so detached from the reality of how to receive your own energy that you're constantly focusing on experiencing yourself or your very essence through what you are able to create as a reaction in another's field. This hypermasculine energy is extremely egoic. Hence, I connected it to the Luciferian archetype in my last video. The Luciferian energy and complex is a desire to dominate from the need to assert the nature of the fixed self, because Lucifer is a very sly, clever, manipulative, and powerful energy that knows itself based on what it's able to create in the material and mental plane. Most hypermasculine individuals are extremely driven to succeed based on their mentalized notions of what is right and what is wrong. They are expert manifestors, and they're able to get what they want because they're so deeply connected to the mental field. This means that they are very aware of the fact that thoughts create reality, and so they're very much able to manifest from a place of desire and being convinced that what they can think is what they will end up creating. Now, although this might seem to be a powerful thing, and it really is when it comes to manifesting in the physical and material plane, there are a lot of issues that accompany this experience of mental fixation. Because what this comes down to is that being hooked up solely to the mental and material plane creates an extremely imbalanced emotional and spiritual experience. Those who dominate in the physical sense are unable to even let in the notion of love, because surrender to them seems like the most self-effacing ingredient in the recipe of life. To surrender is to let go of that control gathered in the mental field of intelligence. To surrender would mean that all of a sudden all those mental convictions, firm beliefs, and thoughts that lead to a mental state of control are proven ineffective. And so the need to juggle the mental identity with the physical identity all of a sudden is revoked if that individual in question meets the feminine counterpart. Now let's enter the world of the divine feminine to understand what the feminine charged polarity wants to experience. First of all, the feminine as the receiver of information very often comes with this very unconditional energy to it. The feminine in and of itself is transient, transcendental. It's the flow of the air, the water, the ether. This is an energy that is untamed. It's wild and uninhibited in its expression, which is why some women that are carriers of an over-dominant feminine expression can be extremely wild, chaotic, lack direction, lack groundedness, and lack a feeling of security, because they seem to float from direction to direction and find it very difficult to navigate the physical and material plane. This is the shadow side of the feminine consciousness. It's being unable to create a channel or a conduit for this energy to flow through in a precise and regulated manner. Hence, for vehicles of this feminine consciousness that are really connected to their intuition, their wisdom, and the state of free-flowing ideation, it's important to understand what is really the function of the feminine energy, which is, of course, to create direction for the ego's potentiality. So the ego is very much the capsule for the masculinized identity. The ego, as the container for what the self is composed of, needs to have a certain avenue through which it is expressed. For instance, if you create an identity which is focused on the need to prove your sense of self, because you are loaded with a certain program that to prove yourself you need to make a certain amount of money, or develop a certain status, have a certain job, or create certain things that are self-concepts, allowing you to experience a mature sense of who you are, then you're going to feel like all of your energy needs to be expended on maturing that sense of self, which is of course rooted in illusion. The blind spot of this masculine consciousness and the ego construct is that all there is to the identity is the underlying notion of what created it. The blind spot of this egoic construct is that nothing exists outside of it, because when reality is experienced through the lens of the ego, there is nothing more to be experienced. All that the ego experiences is this feedback loop of repetitious behaviors, actions, and programmed thoughts that support its very fixedness and rigidity. And lo and behold, when that becomes the status quo nature of your reality, you are threatened by the feminine wisdom, which every single masculine and feminine individual is going to be experiencing. It's impossible to not be connected to some degree of emotional truth, because all of us at the end of the day experience a rich inner world, which is either confirming or negating what our ego's behavior is dictating for us. If you're focused on hypermaterialism and are run by a demanding and toxic egoic construct, then you might be feeling some degree of unfulfillment. Maybe there's a deep yearning for love, which you aren't able to put to rest. Maybe you're experiencing this deep tiredness and lethargic nature because even though you're doing everything that your mind is telling you should be doing, and even experiencing the successes because of that, part of you still feels a need to escape your reality, to distract yourself, to always be fed with more validation, more stimulation, and more lower chakra dominance, which allows you to feel rooted in that sense of who you think you should be. But the reality is that the authentic self is always equally masculine and feminine. The soul's nature in this higher etheric dimensional realm is always transient. It's not attached, it's not focused on proving its sense of self because it knows there's nothing to prove. The soul on that etheric level of higher dimensional wisdom wants only to create a mission for itself, to spread its unique energetic signature and to create a lasting impression on Earth. The ego is always defying that essential mission by trying to generate more karma to prove itself as a separate aspect of the higher identity. However, when we realize that the true gift of life is experienced when we merge the ego or the lower self and the soul or the higher self, we are able to effectively merge the masculine and feminine constructs. The masculine consciousness being that strict vehicle of intelligence which wants to connect us to the physical plane and the mastery within it, and the higher self, which is that more transient observer of consciousness, which wants us to be free, uninhibited, and wild in passionate discovery, which is the nature of the divine feminine. And so let's bring this back to the nature of the twin flame journey, where one counterpart is always more masculine and associated with this divine masculine and egoic construct, and one counterpart is already in a slightly more elevated and wise position of mastering the etheric plane and understanding that the divine feminine is really the conduit to that mission of ascension. When these two counterparts meet, the journey that is very disruptive begins when the feminine begins to highlight to the masculine his own shadow side. And it's extremely important to note that the man in the relationship may be the carrier of the feminine intelligence. So the divine feminine, as the case may be, could actually be held by the masculine counterpart in the physical. Likewise, the more Luciferian or masculine consciousness could be held by the woman in the physical relationship. What's also important to understand is that gender and physical sex is something that has to be treated in a very nuanced manner, because these gender polarities are just what's experienced externally. Internally, it's all about energy and our orientation with these different lessons of energetic interplay. There are same-sex relationships, for instance, where one partner is masculine and one is more feminine, and it cannot be otherwise. There are also twin flame relationships that are not romantic in nature at all, where you might be experiencing this kind of a bond, which is transcendental and extremely deep in its learning lessons, with a mother, a father, a brother, sister, or even a non-human. It could be an animal. It could be a different member of your soul family, which you might not even associate with a romantic counterpart. When you're experiencing this extremely powerful pull to this individual that's trying to teach you a certain lesson, but not in the traditional or conventional way, then you may be experiencing a twin flame relationship, which is teaching you how to harmonize with the complementary energy to the one that dominates within your energetic system. So if you associate more with this lower frequency masculine nature, meaning you're afraid of giving up your sense of control, or you feel that you're mentally inclined to create your reality from a place of preconceived beliefs about your sense of self, about what love is, and about the transactional nature of energy in your life, then your twin flame would be a feminine vessel of awareness that's bringing you closer to the truth of what your heart already knows, but that you are disconnecting yourself from because you're afraid of giving in to that primordial awareness that you are not actually predominantly masculine in nature, and that it's safe to give up this toxic attachment to the lower self's needs and identity. That is really the illusion. If you associate with either your masculine or your feminine energy, and do not believe that you can synergize the two of them, then you're going to feel an extreme push-pull of energies when you encounter the twin flame counterpart. This person is going to reveal to you that there's no in-between. There's no ability to somewhat synchronize with the divine masculine or divine feminine consciousness. You are either in complete unity or you're going to be experiencing disparate parts, fighting for reconciliation while one is afraid of surrender, and typically that is the masculine consciousness. Now let's take the story to an even deeper level to understand how this dynamic actually ensued. The splitting of consciousness into these two separate parts, the duat, the masculine and feminine, the light and the dark, can be synonymous with a higher frequency aspect of source and a lower frequency aspect of source, the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, as two chambers of intelligent information which are encoded with the awareness of how to come back home into unity. When these two fragments of the same soul signature, the same aspect of oneness, enter two separate bodies, they are going to be innately driven to come back to each other because what they both desire most is to come back home to themselves. Just like in the case of the yin and the yang, they have the part that the other needs most, but they're terrified of releasing that part because they're keeping it to themselves as a reminder of what that other complementary aspect is storing as an essential nature of self that has to be integrated. Which means the divine masculine, even the one lost in the Luciferian programming, the conditional biases of his subconscious mind, any trauma or karmic nature which the physical self might be bearing in either a man's or a woman's body, that masculine consciousness is going to hold a certain gift that the feminine needs. And so when the divine feminine meets the masculine in the physical plane, she is really activated. The masculine, as the fractal of Lucifer, actually creates the third dimensional reality. From a higher dimensional perspective, this third dimensional playing field is a reflection of this masculine Luciferian energy. Because the nature of the matrix is cubic. This is the cubic dimension in which thoughts crystallize from intention, where actions and material giving of energy leads to the reflective response. So the masculine consciousness feels extremely safe in the physical. And for the bearer of that masculine consciousness, the way that he associates himself with survival is the reason why he is not keen to give up his connection to the dominant masculine polarity charge. The masculine feels at home being with himself as a separate egoic being who knows himself based on everything that he has learned to adapt to and conform to in this lower dimensional realm. However, when the feminine arrives in his life, he is on a very deep subconscious level awakened to the truth that there's a higher aspect of self that has been longing to be reunited. The feminine is quite literally the key into the lock that the masculine embodies. The feminine, being the key, is the energetic signature that unlocks the lock that the masculine could never find another solution for. The lock has to serve a certain purpose. And when the feminine and masculine consciousness truly integrate or click into place, this illusion dissolves. There is no need for the third dimensional playing field if the masculine and feminine were to synchronize. So quite literally, we would not be alive if the masculine and feminine were fully integrated. So this gets into an even more paradoxical question, which is why would the masculine and feminine need to come down into these separate aspects of self and seem to lose that key that they each desire most in order to experience painful separation, the disconnect of their soul signatures for some measly attempt to come back to oneness? Well, this is really where the nature of the paradox can be uncovered. In order for the masculine to understand his highest identity, meaning for the Luciferian energy and higher archetype to ascend and to come back into reunion with source consciousness, Lucifer had to descend into the physical realm. Lucifer had to forget the nature of his experience and had to go through this long and arduous journey into conquering the physical plane and being used to conquering life and achieving his own needs in a way that is familiar and comfortable until he meets the feminine counterpart. The only way for Lucifer to awaken to the shortcomings of the egoic, maladaptive strategies of existence is to meet the divine feminine. And then he's awakened to an even deeper truth of self-realization, which is that Lucifer is really playing into a grand illusion that he conceived of to learn to harmonize with his divine feminine. And when he does so, the need to be Lucifer completely ends. Lucifer discovers that it's a failed attempt to dominate anything because all he's ever wanted was to find that missing key and to find the way to synchronize with that key, which is the feminine within his own soul. He needs to choose to no longer adopt the Luciferian way of being, which is simply a way of adapting to life without his divine feminine. Within every single one of us, whether you associate with the twin flame journey or not, you bear these energetic archetypes. You have the gods and goddesses within your own being. You have the mental prowess, the intellectual attachment, the gifts of the ego, the ability to manipulate and to hold this dark energy to achieve whatever things that you think you need to be superior in the material and mental planes. However, you likewise have the acute awareness of your higher dimensional self. You have intuition. You have an ability to trust yourself and the innate wisdom that lives within your somatic awareness, your heart's feelings, your gut, and the intuition that arises spontaneously when you receive information from your higher chakra system. But in order to connect to that deep awareness, you need to first choose to let go of the hold that Luciferian construct has on you. And what that really is the nature of the ego. The ego is the devil archetype that lives within every single one of us. And if we let it dominate us, it sure will. For many, this energy of the devil lives within us by creating this smoke and mirrors reality that leads us into deeper confusion, despair, mind games, where we even start to gaslight ourselves as a way of mirroring the kind of manipulation that we have experienced in the past. If we are susceptible to any kind of manipulation in the physical, we are still allowing that aspect of ourselves to dominate us. And so we haven't chosen to synchronize the opposing energies to teach our own inner Lucifer that lesson of divine love. Because if we choose to truly integrate all of the fear, all of that smoke and mirrors game, and all of the confusion dissipates, and we find that the path back home was always within us, but we were too afraid to realize that we can end the chaos and the distortion of the ego to find the way through the illusion. And so when the masculine and the feminine consciousness meet, whether the masculine is a physical man or a woman, and whether the feminine is housed within the body of a man or a woman, these two identities wake each other up to the reality of what they have each been missing. The feminine often, upon meeting her masculine, idealizes him. She's able to see a reflection of everything she has ever wanted in the masculine consciousness. She's able to see that groundedness, that security, that mental connection, that achievement that she's always been looking for can also be accessed based on connection to the inner power and the lower chakra system sense of security, which can be activated as soon as you have faith in and belief in the nature of who you are. But when the feminine activates that bit of inner confidence within herself, which typically occurs after she's encountered her physical masculine counterpart, she realizes she's actually whole, and she starts to demand a deeper level of connection with her masculine counterpart. She doesn't seek any more domination or superiority in the physical sense. She doesn't seek connection only through the sexual intimacy, through the connection to what can be gleaned in the material sense. She's not there for a physical relationship. She's there to bring her masculine into the higher dimensional world of mission, of truth, and of how to create heaven on earth, which can only be experienced if the masculine likewise chooses to depart from his egoic domination. Now back to the sad part that I touched on in the last video. The reason why I said that no twin flames are currently in union is because the status of the energy within every single one of us, not just twin flame union, pairings, but every actual individual on earth, is that we're all still choosing to ascend based on our readiness to harmonize these two charged polarities. All bearers of the divine feminine consciousness are leveling up, are choosing not to look to the masculine counterpart or even focus on the physical reality, to decide whether or not they are ready to take charge of their mission and to pursue their highest soul's calling, which involves deep surrender and showing up to be the oracle, the healer, the divine bringer of wisdom based on channeling this higher intelligence and doing so from the heart and soul despite the occasional domination that the egoic mind might try to produce as a way of confusing the soul's nature. Likewise, the masculine has now been given a very important choice. He has been shown that there is an aspect of himself roaming around in the physical dimension and is non-physically always calling his name to guide him into deeper integration, where love doesn't need to be earned, where there is no proving that is necessary, where all he needs to do is commit to his highest soul's plan of expansion, to give of himself not in the physical sense, but in the deepest way of vulnerability through the heart and soul, and he can be free of this egoic bondage, and he no longer needs to experience the push and pull of that devil energy living within him, because that, like a curse, would instantaneously break as soon as he would desire to give himself to that feminine construct. As the energy currently stands, the feminine is the biggest trigger and threat to the masculine's nature, which also means that inside every single bearer of this divine feminine energy, there is also an inner threat experience when it comes to merging the feminine and masculine consciousness. The two are meant to cooperate and experience a harmonious marriage of parts, but right now they're still standing in their independent leanings. They're choosing to be separate because they don't currently trust each other. Many of these divine feminine bearers of wisdom are feeling like they cannot trust the masculine because the masculine has betrayed this higher soul's mission. He has chosen not to be ready yet, and he's chosen to stick with his prior patterns, even though he's felt the disruptive wave of awareness offered to him by this divine feminine source. Because the inner part, which accommodates the divine feminine, is still something that the devil within him is crushing. Within every bearer of that dominant masculine construct is a sensitive, vulnerable aspect of him. Could be the inner child, or just a part of his heart and spirit that he doesn't know how to associate with. And so if you associate personally with this masculine consciousness and are looking to ascend and are trying to battle this other Luciferian energy which may be dominating your mind, think about what it takes to integrate with that vulnerable self within you. Because you have the power, and only you have the power, to choose to adopt the nurturing nature of the feminine, to first choose to heal the part of you that is afraid of letting go, and that needs to control as a way of guarding your heart and choosing to not allow this more transient and flowy state of being. The feminine as the key is showing the masculine that all he needs to do is to match the part of him that already knows the way, that already understands. He has created this entire experience for him to come home in the way of the hero's journey, and that the only way to come home is to realize that he has been creating all of this, the darkness and the light, the heaven and the hell, the despair and the separation. He's been creating the misery for himself by choosing to stay confined to the notion that this has to be difficult and that this journey is a tragic one, because that is the nature of this devil energy within him. It dictates predictable suffering because the ego is a self-annihilating black hole that pulls you into this pit of despair to prove to you that you are not worthy of unconditional love. The nature of the ego is only to collapse possibilities and to build more uncertainty around the notion of surrender. And yet that is exactly what the divine feminine is made to shatter. So within every single individual, regardless of whether you associate more with the masculine or feminine consciousness, is that complementary part. Within your darkness is a ray of light that is guiding you through the despair, through the disillusionment, through the struggle, and through the needing to prove your sense of self, into the portal of opportunity that guides you out of the illusion, where you realize you created all of this. You live within your other counterpart, whether or not you associate with the masculine or feminine identity, because you are truly neither one of them. You are a fractal of Source, and all of us, from the highest dimensional perspective, are actually twin flames. We're all monadic fractals of the One, which means that for us to let go of the notion that we need to play the game as only the masculine or only the feminine, allow ourselves to ascend to new heights, where we can feed ourselves the wisdom to quell our masculine insecurity and to guide ourselves into deeper empowerment. Because the ultimate level of awareness is where we allow the divine feminine to rise. And for all of us, that is the way out of the matrix. If we want to stop connecting to the physical struggle, we have to allow ourselves to fall up and out of it, where we achieve the effect of anti-gravity, which is letting love through us, letting a higher power take over, which is inevitably going to guide us toward unity, but that we need to confide in by choosing to magnetically raise our own field of awareness and synchronize with this radiative force of the divine masculine and the magnetic nature of the feminine, to reorient our own charged polarities and to realize that the way back to unity was always within us, and whatever has been triggering us is actually what we need to assimilate most to figure out why we needed this entire journey all along.